Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamstra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Rindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Auravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. So welcome to study of Sri Isopanisad. We're going to discuss today verses 9, 10, and 11. So the, again, overview of the Isopanisad is broken up into these 5 sections. So we'll be discussing the 3rd section. So in the first 3 verses, including the invocation, so a total of 4, we discussed this Ishavasyan principle and the importance of living a God-centered life, knowing that everything comes from Krishna, and we have a quota, our share to use, so that we can, use our energies for the higher purpose of life. We don't need to work hard to accumulate, more resources. Everything is provided for us in this complete and perfect manifestation or creation of the absolute complete. So we can then find our absolute satisfaction, our complete happiness, when we connect with that complete whole. And that is the understanding from the first 3 verses plus invocation 4 verses. And we explained what happens when one works within this Ishavasyan principle and what happens when one does not. And when one does not follow this Ishavasyan principle, one Atmaha, kills the opportunity of the soul to return back home and become free from all of the suffering. So this is the central theme of this section. Last week we discussed verses 4 through 8, these 5 verses. We talked about the incredible, inconceivable potencies of the Lord. And they establish how the Supreme Lord is far supreme and superior to us, such that his abilities, they seem inconceivable to us. They almost seem like contradictions. How he can walk and not walk, run faster than the mind, be within and without. And like this, we saw many inconceivable potencies. But these contradictions are only seemingly contradictions, and they are due to our limited knowledge. When we try to apply our own experience, our own understanding, it is like the Dr. Frog mentality of trying to understand the vastness of the ocean from his own well. So these qualities that we hear, these inconceivable potencies, they meant to inspire us to render service and to surrender to the Lord. And a Mahabhagavat has vision. They see this very clearly. They see everything in relation to Krishna. knowing Him to be the source of everything. And we discussed this ekatwam principle. This we are one with God in quality, but not in quantity. So simultaneously one in quality, but very distinct in quantity, very tiny. And so we are one with God also in purpose, that we are meant to enjoy with each other, not in separation with the Supreme Lord. So this is the summary of the last 5 verses we discussed. And so in this section, verses 9 through 11, we're going to discuss vidya and avidya, this knowledge and ignorance. Okay? So I'll just read from verse 9. Those who engage in a culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So we're seeing here in this verse 9 2 types of ignorant people. One who is just engaged in the culture of nescient activities. That is one. And 2, those who are worse still and engage in so-called knowledge. So we'll discuss both of these. So avidya, this ignorance, it refers to ignorance of this Ishavasim principle, of the Lord's proprietorship of everything. When we fail to realize the Lord's proprietorship of everything, we then fail to understand and utilize the facilities within the world appropriately. So, failing to live a God-centered life, this is what one is ignorant of. So, ignorant of who we are as spirit soul, in relation to this Ishavasya, the Supreme Lord. So, this is the ignorance we're speaking about. There is so much ignorance out there, but specifically, this is the most importance of ignorance. And what is the result of this avidya? Why is it bad? It's because it takes us to a hellish place, as this verse explains, right? Takes to the darkest region of ignorance. Right? Because the more we forget this Ishavasya principle, the more we try to use the Lord's resources to satisfy our own senses, separate from the Lord, who is the real proprietor of everything that we are trying to enjoy. And so, why does it lead to hell? Because in an attempt to satisfy one's senses, it leads one to perform so many sinful activities, willing to do whatever it takes, driven by lust, and thus one must suffer the results, the consequences. Ultimately, everything is a proprietorship of the Lord. If we use the Lord's resources for ourselves, we are stealing. And as Prabhupada always says, all thieves are ultimately punished. So, this is why this avidya, it leads to a dark place. And what is worse than one who is ignorant is one who is ignorant but disguised to be knowledgeable. And that is even worse. And we'll discuss more about that a little bit later. But it's worse. Why? Because it not only takes oneself down, but it brings others down with them. At least if I'm ignorant, but everybody knows I'm ignorant, then I'm only, taking myself down. But if I am ignorant in the disguise of being knowledgeable, then others may follow. And thus, that person is even more dangerous because they not only take themselves down, but bring others further down. Right? So, this, verse today, it's so relevant because, so much advancement in knowledge has come, right? We have put so much value on this material knowledge. Oh, this person went to this degree or this university versus that university, this PhD, and then we place so much value, getting our children into great colleges, paying, tutors and tuition fees and SAT scores, and so much emphasis we're putting. But we can ask, what is the result of all this knowledge? We've acquired more knowledge today than we had hundreds of years ago, but are we happier with all of this knowledge? We know maybe more about how the body works and the different cells. We know more about outer space through space travel and big telescopes. We know more about how to move data around the world very, very quickly. All that's for sure more knowledge. But has it resulted in a better life, in more happiness? It's clearly no. And the reason is why? Because the material knowledge is only teaching us one thing. Or I can say 4 things. How to eat nicely, how to sleep nicely, how to mate nicely, and how to defend nicely. All this material knowledge, it is simply teaching us how to live a sophisticated animal life. I know that sounds very extreme, but if you think about it objectively, every university simply teaching us how to do these 4 things very nicely. It is all on the platform of the body. And so the problem is that this extreme focus on material education is compromising one's focus on real knowledge, right? Education of the self, of the spirit soul. No time to study Bhagavad Gita, I have to study this. Sadly, if we ask parents, even if sometimes we ask devotees for their children, would you prefer they achieved the highest scores in their school or they understood Bhagavad Gita? What they would pick. Right? So there's so much focus on this material knowledge, but it is actually all avidya. It is ignorant of this Ishavasya principle. Who is the ultimate proprietor? So this is what brings us to the topic of real knowledge. What is real human knowledge? It tells us who we are. Who is the Lord? Why we are here? What is my relationship with the Supreme Lord? Any knowledge that gives us information about the eternal connection with the Supreme Lord and our position as spirit soul, that is real knowledge. And that ultimately is the only valuable knowledge we can have. Yes, there is a role for material knowledge in our maintenance of our facility. But in the absence of real knowledge of who am I, who is Krishna, and what is my relationship, it has no value. It'll take us to the darkest regions of hell. Due to this, it'll fuel our desires to enjoy the senses and enjoy the body. I know this may seem very, wow, how can we speak this way? But just think what the material knowledge gets us to do. So real knowledge is knowledge coming in Shastra. We know in Bhagavad Gita, intelligence is greater than the mind and the senses. And it is sitting right next to the spirit soul. And that chariot drawn by the horses. So real knowledge gives us the highest thing to know, which is the spirit soul. All of our material education, it stops at the body. It stops at the platform of the body. Srila Prabhupada said, no university is teaching about the spirit soul. But that is our real identity. Right? So, and as we know, knowledge is information that can be used to accomplish something. I'll say that again. Knowledge is information used to accomplish something. I know about aerospace engineering, and so I can now make an airplane to be able to fly in the sky. The result of all of our material knowledge is to acquire something. But what is it getting us? Temporary happiness and endless suffering. It leads to more birth, death, old age, and disease. Nothing else. The highest of highest degrees is teaching us how to use God's resources for ourselves. And thus, we will suffer the results. But spiritual knowledge, what does spiritual education get us? How to find eternal happiness, free from the cycles of birth, death, old age, and disease. So now, which knowledge do we want for our children? Eternal life of happiness or temporary happiness with endless suffering? It's very clear, right? But when we don't think about it in the context of avidya and vidya, it becomes very difficult. And then, society is guiding us to a very different conclusion. And I wanted to read a quote from Mantra 10 that Srila Prabhupada makes, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya, maintained that all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy, and that by culturing them, one becomes no better than an ass. I was stunned by that statement. And then Prabhupada continues, this same principle is found in Sri Isopanisad. By advancement in material knowledge, modern man is simply being converted into an ass. Now that's quite a statement. But if we analyze and objectively look at it, that's what's happening, right? And the ass analogy is given throughout our shastra, because engaging in sense gratification is considered to be very ass-like, or like a donkey. The scriptures say that ass is a symbol of stupidity. Why? Because the donkey is made to work very, very hard all day long, carrying big loads of laundry for the washerman. And for what gain? To get a few pieces of grass at the end of the day. But the donkey is walking day and night by fields and fields of grass. Yet it is going to work so hard, labor so intensely, just to enjoy a few small pieces of grass. And our Shastra explains, nothing can be more stupid. And thus the ass is this sign. So the materially contaminated person is of like mind, of like intelligence. Working so hard. For what profit? Nothing. A few moments of happiness. Ultimately ending in great suffering and difficulty. Satisfying the senses is such an endless endeavor and hopeless endeavor for peace and happiness. And so the material education is leading one to try to endeavor more and more and more to satisfy the senses. Yet the result is just suffering and misery. And so it is considered like an ass-like mentality, and not very intelligent. So those now who propagate this knowledge that pushes us to gratify the senses, they're more dangerous, because they are held up in society as so-called learned, as role models. And they inspire others, thousands and millions of others, to follow this same mentality, dragging people down to the most hellish of conditions. Right? And Srila Prabhupada uses the example of a cobra. A cobra bedecked with a jewel on its head is very dangerous. Why? Because a cobra that will become attracted by the jewel and then go close to that cobra and then put our life in danger. A cobra without a jewel will run away from. So the cobra is dangerous, but a cobra with a jewel is even more dangerous because it attracts us. So similarly, one who is ignorant has a vidya, well, they're dangerous for themselves. But one who is in the disguise of knowledge, but is actually ignorant, is even more dangerous. Right? Because they'll lead others down. And we see all the dangerous types of knowledge we've acquired, nuclear weapons and, aerosol cans and, all kinds of foods that now become so easy and quick to eat but are so bad for you. It's all knowledge, but very destructive in result. And so Prabhupada comments, in this purport, that the Vedic scholars who, uphold the goal of the Vedas to be only enjoying the senses, albeit in a regulated manner, they're very dangerous. These Veda Vada Rata people, right? They enjoin that the Shastra, the Vedas, are just to enjoy the senses. And they are very, very dangerous because it looks like they have knowledge. They're speaking from the Vedas, Shastra. But they are misconstruing the purpose of the Vedas. As Krishna says in the 15th chapter, that I am to be known of all the Vedas. Vedasya sagar aham eva vedyo. So the only purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. But one who misconstrues the Vedas to suggest that they're meant for sense enjoyment are actually even the most dangerous, because they give off the impression, and our Acharya's comment, that these people go to the even darkest regions of ignorance, more than even the sense gratifiers, because they dilute the purport of the real Vedas and they mislead others. So this is the most dangerous. Okay. So now mantra 10. I'm sure I've shocked everybody into, either numbness or attention, one or the other. But this is the reality as presented here. Srila Prabhupada's purports are amazing and very precise. Mantra 10. The wise have explained that one result is derived from culture of knowledge and that a different result is obtained from culture of nescience. So the point here is that there is a different outcome from the knowledge and nescience. Otherwise, there's no point to know the difference. If they all lead to the same point, who cares? But here we see that there's a very different result. Right? And that's why it's very important to know what is knowledge and what is nescience. So again, knowledge is simply understanding the Ishavasyam principle and our relation to it. And everything else is nescience, ignorance. So so-called knowledge, actual nescience, that makes us a sophisticated animal, resulting in animal life, it ends in suffering. And that is the result. All the prestigious universities around the world, the result of it all is the same. Satisfy the senses and suffer the karmic reactions. And this is the backwards nature of society today. Somebody's studying the Bhagavad Gita, and the elders will say, don't waste your time on that. Now is your time to study mathematics and science and English and get into university. Don't waste your time. They'll take the Bhagavad Gita from a child trying to study it. That's how, crazy. And this is the mentality of 99, maybe 0.9%. In all of the material education, it's just a patchwork attempt to cover up the miseries of the material world. Let me try to make a nice existence in this prison house. And the Isopanisad is telling us this very clearly. This is the result of it. Hellish life. Just as the Isopanisad was inspiring us in the last section of verses, to not try to conceive the Lord by our own limited selves, but to hear from authority. Now, the Isopanisad is giving us guidance. Don't be fooled by this avidya. It will lead to very much difficult suffering. But what is the result of real knowledge? Eternal bliss. One that understands the self and begins to shape one's activities, knowing oneself to be part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, knowing the Supreme Lord to be the proprietor of everything. One who knows, I have a quota set aside for me, no need to work like a donkey to acquire what I need. Nature is already provided. I have my quota. One who knows this achieves bliss and happiness. No more birth and death, old age and disease. Eternal bliss and happiness. So the destination is very, very different. And the Isopanisad is telling us that we need the help. We need help to distinguish what is real knowledge and what is illusory knowledge, or avidya. Because we can see how much confusion there is out there today about what is knowledge and what is real knowledge. So we need the help. And in this verse, we see that the wise have explained The opening of this verse, as the wise have explained, is an indication. We must take the shelter of someone who is wise to be able to discriminate between what is right and what is wrong. It's very difficult to see on our own. That's why maybe some of the initial comments I made were so shocking. But actually, it's so obvious. But it's shocking because we've been covered by some other ideas. But the wise can guide us. Right? And why do we need help? Because subtle knowledge is difficult for us to understand. When I can touch and feel something, I can understand it better. If I want to understand a harmonium and how it works, I can see the mechanics of a harmonium. That I can see. I press this button, something is triggered, there's air flowing through it. Okay, I can understand it. But if you want to try to understand the principles of sound, that is very subtle and much more difficult to understand. Okay? So the knowledge about the soul, the most subtle of all things, it takes help. It requires help. And where does that help come from? The Guru. Talking about physics and medicine and computer engineering, very easy in comparison to understanding the soul. And that is Srila Prabhupada's greatest gift and ability. He can make the most difficult of topics to understand, like the soul, very easy for us to understand with his analogy, like the car and the driver. Taking these subtle topics and trying to explain them, not so easy. So we must approach a teacher. And who is a teacher? The teacher of real knowledge? It is one who is a dhira. Dhirastatra namuyati. The sober person. One is undisturbed, no more lamenting, no more hankering, when one knows, who am I? What am I doing here? And how to find perfection of life. That person is undisturbed. The materialist is always disturbed, trying to get more and more and more, frustrated why so many problems are coming, why their attempts for happiness are always being disturbed by setback after setback. That is not a sober or undisturbed person. Who is undisturbed? One who has knowledge. And so Srila Prabhupada comments about the dhira. I just wanted to read his reference to the dhira here. That the dhiras have come to know all these facts by hearing from them, from superior authorities, and have realized this knowledge by following the regulative principles. So this is very, very important. That they have come to know this by following the regulative principles, and they have heard from the superior authorities. I just want to read the next paragraph. This is on the bottom of page 53. To follow the regulative principles, one must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. The transcendental message and regulative principles come down from the spiritual master to the disciple. Such knowledge does not come in the hazardous way of nescient education. One can become a dhira only by submissively hearing the message of the personality of Godhead. The perfect disciple must be like Arjuna, and the spiritual master must be as good as the Lord himself. This is the process of learning vidya, knowledge, from the dhira, the undisturbed. And adhira, one who has not undergone the training of a dhira, cannot be an instructive leader. Modern politicians who pose themselves as dhiras are actually adhiras, and one cannot expect perfect knowledge from them. They are simply busy seeing to their own remuneration in dollars and cents. How can they lead the mass of people to the right path of self-realization? Thus, one must hear submissively from a dhira in order to attain actual education. So how are we going to get real knowledge? We must approach a bona fide spiritual master to understand real knowledge. Otherwise, we will be nescient. So, Prabhupada opens the purport to this mantra 10 with these, 18, and in the Bhagavad Gita, these come from verses 13:8 to 13:12, and there are a total of 20 ways These are, these are not character, but this is the process of acquiring real knowledge. They're the culture of real knowledge. So I was just going to read them quickly. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give respect to others. So we see the first step in this is humility. 2, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. 3, one should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. 4, one should learn forbearance, even in the face of provocation. Again, one must be tolerant, even when provoked. This is when one carries on this principle, then one can acquire real knowledge. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others, meaning one should be clear, straightforward. Now we get to the bolden one, very important. One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. And one must submit himself to such a spiritual master and render service to him and ask relevant questions. This is the means to knowledge, the spiritual master. 7, in order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regular principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. One must follow the rules and regulations. 8, one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. And 9, one should completely refrain from practices that are detrimental to the interests of self-realization. Again, these are the do's and don'ts. 10, one should not accept more than he requires, for the maintenance of the body. Again, our quota is set aside. Use what is necessary to keep the body together. One should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body or consider those related to his body to be his own. Again, come to the spiritual platform. 12, one should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find a means by which one regain his spiritual identity. Remember, all the material knowledge that we are cultivating and trying to acquire, it is simply trying to solve these problems of old age, disease, death, difficulties of the body and mind, of all natural disasters, conflict with others. But none of it's going to work. The only thing that is going to solve these things is spiritual knowledge. And that is what is guided here. 13, one should not be attached to more than necessity of life for spiritual advancement. 14, one should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures enjoin. Again, important here, based on what the scriptures enjoin. Not that one doesn't have attachment to family, but the attachment to family is in their relationship to Krishna, not in our bodily relationship. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables created by the mind. And now we get to the most important of all of them. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and serve him with rapt attention. So this is the most important. With this, all the other qualities automatically develop. But without this, none of them matter. You can be humble, and you can be tolerant, and you can be living a simple life. But if it doesn't lead to you becoming an unalloyed devotee, there is no value. It is better than nothing. But ultimately, the value comes in becoming a devotee. So everything kind of connects through this one, number 16. And this, the final two, quickly. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere, favorable for spiritual culture, and one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. And 18, one should become a scientist or a philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the body. Remember, Einstein had to learn 2 plus 2 all over again. All material knowledge ends with this body. But we should become a scientist, but become a spiritual scientist. Knowledge is important, but the right knowledge is very important. So these 18 things, they form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. So we understand the importance of real knowledge. It leads to our success. And these 18 items, they are the process by which we can acquire real knowledge. And so except for these, everything else is considered to be nescience. Everything else is to be considered nescience. So this is the main point, is that we should come to the process of devotional service, number 16, by the help of Guru, number 6, and with that, all others will bring us to the process or to the point of acquiring real knowledge. Okay. Now, verse 11. Read it. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So here, Isopanisad is very cleverly telling one that you should comparatively analyze, do a comparative study, learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side. And then you can transcend this birth and death for what gain? Eternal bliss and happiness. So don't take this, just at face value. Do analysis. Study. Compare and contrast. What are the pros and cons of nescience and what are the pros and cons of real knowledge? And if you come to see it, we'll see that real knowledge leads one to transcend the cycle of birth and death. Right? And this is the important piece of it. The idea, sometimes people say, well, I have to experience the suffering of the material world to appreciate the blessings of the spiritual world. Or I have to taste this misery of material life to appreciate spiritual bliss. That is not enjoined in our Vedic Shastra. Tasting misery will not necessarily propel one to spiritual life. Getting it out of my system is not a recommended path. You're simply pouring fuel on the fire. You're trying to put out the fire by pouring fuel on it when you try to indulge in the sense gratification. Oh, let me just get it out of my system. Doesn't work. That is not the point. This verse is saying, know about both, then decide. Do a study, and then decide. If I know, about everything there is, then I can decide which is the best for me. So that's the point of the verse, is to see everything in relation to God. Here on this Ishavasya principle. See everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, including our own body. We've been given this body by the Lord for a purpose, and we should use it as such. But using it to satisfy our senses, independent of the Lord, is not the recommended path. One will have to suffer the birth and death, old age and disease, due to the karmic reactions. So, now Prabhupada gives a very beautiful and very vivid discussion here. That escaping the cycles of birth and death by material knowledge is not possible. We're never going to solve disease by scientific research. We're never going to solve old age by scientific research. We're not going to become immortal by scientific research. It's not going to happen. Even the great Hiranyakashipu, he had great skill. He was ruling the whole universe. And yet, he could not become deathless. So if he was baffled in his efforts, what are we going to be able to do? So Srila Prabhupada writes here, I love this statement, that, sorry, this is on page 57, The whole point here is that even Hiranyakashipu, the most powerful materialist, could not become deathless by his various plans. What then can be accomplished by the tiny Hiranyakashipus of today? Oh, gosh, Srila Prabhupada is so perfect and exacting. You know, we brag about all of our abilities, but they're tiny Hiranyakashipus. What we can do, right? So the Sri Isopanisad is telling us that the process of eternal life is to escape death, to get out from disease and old age, and return back home to Godhead. And that requires following knowledge of the Shastra. That is the real knowledge. That knowledge which reveals the self and the Ishavasya principle. That is the knowledge. Knowing the complete whole, serving the complete whole, brings about complete happiness and complete eradication of birth, death, old age, and disease, and brings about eternal bliss and happiness. So it is this transcendental knowledge that is needed. And thankfully, Krishna is sending his representative as Guru Tattva to help us understand this very subtle science, to help us understand and illuminate that we are part and parcel of Krishna. He feels very sorry for our ignorance, our avidya, and very badly wants to bring us to the platform of real knowledge. And so struggling for existence in the material world is a battle we won't win. Stop trying to satisfy our senses and approach the spiritual master and acquire this knowledge. This is what these three verses are telling us. These three verses are giving us guidance. No, by following Neshes, you will go to the darkest regions. By following real knowledge, you will achieve bliss and happiness. Now the choice is ours. Don't try to figure it out on your own. You must approach Shastra. And that is what this section of Isopanisad is telling us. So just a final comment now. We've spoken so much against material knowledge. Let us understand the value of material knowledge, though, in context. Material knowledge is important. It has value. It allows us to maintain the body. You know, having scientific research to understand how to help myself from some disease is valuable. Medicines are important, but it's important in context to my service. By maintaining the body nicely, I can then use it to render service to the Lord. So getting education is very important. You know, devotees acquire the highest of all education so that they can understand and use the resources of the material world for the service of Krishna, not for the service of themselves. So real knowledge is to take all knowledge, both material knowledge and spiritual knowledge, and use it in the service of Krishna. So material education is not being shut down. It's saying it is not the end. And Prabhupada gives the example of the temperature, right? The body must be maintained at a temperature of 98.6 degrees. But just because 98.6 doesn't mean one should go, 99.6 is even better. 101 is even better. 102 is even better. No, more heat is not better. More material knowledge is not better. Yes, take material knowledge so that you can maintain yourself in a simple way, a basic way. And then acquire spiritual knowledge for the ultimate purpose of life. So knowledge, like heat in the body, has its value, but too much heat kills the body. You know, too much material knowledge just takes one to the darkest places of suffering. So use the material knowledge in context. Right? So that is the purpose. So the summary just of this section again, verse 9 tells us about knowledge and ignorance. You know, 10, different destinations that each will take, and 11, do the comparative analysis and then decide. Knowledge that leads one to eating nicely, sleeping nicely, mating nicely, and defending nicely is not going to give us eternal happiness and bliss. And that is all material knowledge. It is within the realm of nescience. But focusing on culturing real knowledge, transcendental knowledge of the self and of the Supreme Lord. That can take one to eternal bliss and happiness. And so that is what we're being inspired to follow in these verses 9 through 11. So we've established a lot so far in these first 11 verses of Isopanisad. And next week we'll discuss verses 12, 13, and 14 in our continued study of Isopanisad. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Any questions or comments on this section?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the class, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
We have to leave because we have to go for service.
Yes. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Hari,
Yes? Prabhuji, you can go, then Mataji, you can go.
Okay. So, now the question I have is like, I heard the saying like, nature takes care of everybody kind of. So how do you explain somebody using this principles of Isopanisad? Like, why there is hunger for homeless people around? I mean, yeah. Can you comment on that, please?
Why there is hunger. So this is more in relation to the first two verses, right? There's a quota set aside and everything is perfect and complete. So why is there hunger? Why are there shortages? Is that the question?
Correct, yeah. And is it like we've come so far, we've entangled ourselves so far that there's no way to go back, and that's why we have to proceed on this material development that we are on right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand how to explain somebody that.
Yeah. So explain it real simply. There's more world hunger today than there was 100 years ago. There's more. There's more disease today than there was 100 years ago. So the path of it, but we have more knowledge. We have more knowledge of the body. We have more knowledge of agriculture. We have more knowledge of fertile soils. We have more scientific knowledge of how to grow a crop. Yet there's more shortages. So suggesting that material knowledge is going to solve world hunger, well, what's the evidence? We have clear evidence to the contrary. Setting aside Isopanisad for a second, there's very clear knowledge to the contrary. That despite all the advancements, there's more suffering. There's more disease. There's more distresses of the mind. There are more shortages. So clearly there's some flaw in the system. And then you can start to explain what's the flaw. Because when we hoard resources, when we use Krishna's property, not acknowledging he is a proprietor, there is suffering. There is a punishment. So the hunger, the disease, everything we see is a result of our actions done under nescience, ignorance. Ignorance of knowing who is the real proprietor. So in order to solve the suffering, we have to solve the root cause, which is our actions and ignorance. By knowing who is the Supreme Lord, and knowing who is providing all the resources, and knowing that I am his part and parcel, I will start to perform activities that will not create future suffering. And thus, I can stop the mindless sufferings of humanity. So, the first part's easy. You can see it and observe it. The second part takes some faith and some experience. But it's pretty clear. So, then you can give more and more details based on how much they're ready to hear, but that's, I guess, what I can offer at this point. Thank you. Mataji, you had a question? Palika Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, yeah, thank you so much for the lecture. Yeah, I had a question regarding the part which you talked about the Vedic scholars, the Vedavrata people, they are, how they are more dangerous.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on that? I mean, they are appearing to be obviously more knowledgeable about the Shastras, but at the same time, they are misguiding us. So, specifically, if you can give an example how they're misguiding, are we talk here is not about the we are not talking about Mayavadis, correct? Here is not that. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's the Maya Pratyakya Gyan. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there's the different miscreants explained by Krishna, and two of them are Prabhupada quotes here. One is the Veda Vadarata. And the Veda Vadaratas, what they are doing is they're taking the Vedas and saying the purpose of Vedas is to enjoy the senses. So they're quoting from Shastra. They're reciting Sanskrit. They are doing yagyas. So it looks spiritual. It looks like it is, something of value. And so what happens is people ignorantly will follow them. Oh, this person knows. They've read the Vedas and they're saying we should enjoy the senses. Okay, let's do it. And that's very dangerous. But because they are misconstruing Krishna's intent, that is even a more offensive approach. At least if I'm indirectly enjoying Krishna's resources for my own, through a material-oriented life, I am not trying to falsely pretend to have knowledge and fool others. And thus it is a more dangerous and more punishable offense. And thus it's commented that they go to the even darkest regions. Whereas the material-oriented person who is just in ignorance, or there is still suffering for the ignorance, but not as bad as one who takes the Vedas. Krishna's clear intent of the Vedas is to know him, and says, no, it's not to know him, it's to enjoy your senses, regulated sense enjoyment. And let's do this yagya, let's read from this part of the Vedas, and it looks as if spirituality. So that is the specific issue or approach of the Veda Vadaratas.
Okay. So basically, they are trying to, if I'm understanding, they're trying to propagate the karma kanda process.
Yeah, but saying that's the intent of everything. They're not saying, okay, take the karma kanda process as a progressive stage to bhakti. Right? The purpose of karma kanda process, it is in the Vedas. But the purpose is ultimately bring to somebody to know Krishna. So they're not saying, okay, here, start here to build your faith. That would be an okay use. But they're suggesting that this is the whole purpose of the Vedas. Right? So that's why it becomes very dangerous and malicious. And they can influence others. And that's why Prabhupada gave the example of the snake, the cobra, with a jewel. Right? That jewel attracts people to come closer, when in reality, when we see a cobra, we should run. In reality, when we see somebody of ignorance, we should run. Because it appears attractive, it makes it more dangerous.
Yeah, I got it, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for your clear explanation.
Thank you, Mataji. Anything else?
Prabhuji,
Yes. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I've been hiding behind this screen, and it's a little for me to try to engage, the class like this. But first, I wanted to please accept my humblest and sincerest obeisances for these wonderful, wonderful classes. They're so wonderful, and this particular section I'm enjoying very, very much. And I wanted to just share. I've been finding a lot of success and joy in these mantras and reading them. They're very deep, but to contemplate them on yapa is really amazing. And I just wanted to share this with the class because I know the class is full of pure Vaishnavas, and I think that maybe others can get some benefit of some joy from this. But I've been really enjoying reading the mantra and then contemplating this on yapa, because then all you can just concentrate on the one mantra, and like it's given me a lot of joy, and I wanted to share that to the class first and foremost.
Oh, thank you very much for your realization. That's nice to hear you're enjoying. This Isopanisad is very sweet, and it does require some meditation on our verses because they're a little enigmatic at first, but glad. And Srila Prabhupada's purports in this book are extraordinary. They're very deep and they're very strong purports. So.
They're fantastic. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. And on this mantra 11, we're
Yes.
talking about the process of material science side by side with real knowledge. To kind of, I don't know, to kind of explain that better, does that basically mean by understanding the Isopanisad principle, that when we're actually trying to study material things, it makes sense because it's in relation to the Lord and it can be executed for the proper usage for the Lord instead of just for ourselves, so that we're actually making gain with the material knowledge in dovetail to real knowledge. But if we just separate it, then it will lead us to the darkest place. Is that the injunction of the mantra?
Yeah, that's really nicely summarized. It's not that material knowledge is completely useless. Knowing how the body functions, or knowing how the atmosphere works, or knowing how to cultivate crops, that's all material knowledge, right? That's useful if the cultivating of the crops and maintaining the body and whatnot is used to serve Krishna as Ishavasya. So but using that knowledge simply to satisfy one's senses is considered nescience. So it's why we don't condemn material knowledge. We condemn the use of material knowledge to satisfy one's senses because it ends in misery. And we're trying to help everyone be free of misery. So yeah, now that you've got it really nicely summarized.
And basically, the people misinterpreting the Vedas, I can't say it correctly.
Yep, no problem.
What call the Veda?
Veda, Vada, Rata.
Veda, Vada, Rapa. Basically, they're like, selective literalists. They're like the people reading the Bible who are just choosing what suits whatever selfish need that they want, and they're just selectively trying to literalize the Shastra.
There's a personal motive. Yep, exactly. There's an agenda that they've got, and so they use some other evidence to support their point, right? It's what most people do. It's what politicians do. It's what a lot of people do, right? They don't take it in its absolute sense, and they use it to purport some selfish motive.
Thank you, Prabhu. Lastly, you know how we always talk of the 8,400,000 species of life, and going up and down in this evolutionary process of the soul. But when we always talk about the human birth, we're always saying, well, out of the 8,400,000, this is the only one that has the highest consciousness and the facilities to realize God. But isn't it that 400,000 species of the 8,400,000 are actually humanoids spread across the universe? So are there other species of humanoids that can reach God consciousness? Couldn't the demigods,
Yes.
since above us that have higher facilities, also reach liberation? It might seem like that.
No. Yeah. When we say one, we don't say one species. We say only in the human form of life. And you're right. There are 400,000 human species of life. So there are different gradations of human species, but it is only the human species that can achieve God realization. So yeah, any of the 400,000, but they have different facilities to be able to do so. Some more, some less within the human species. There's a gradation, from Lord Brahma, down to some of the more, what we call uncivilized humans. And though they span not just planet Earth, they span all the planetary systems within the material world.
Thank you so much, brothers.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the nice questions. Anything else today?
So Prabhuji, that 400,000 human forms you talked about, so then that you were saying that is including the demigods and also the people with the hellish planets, everything, all that is included?
Yeah.
The hellish planets?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah. And even on planet Earth, there are more than one species of human. Now, don't ask to define them. But there are, different species of life. But don't ask. So, okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vijay.
How much time it takes one person to accept this Ishavashan principle? Yes, it has been explained in this, but it might take years, lifetime, or because this concept to stick is not easy. Because our roots are materially infected, and we've been treated with the knowledge of this materialist thinking, and with this introduction of these kind of things, how it can immediately attack this.
Yeah, it's a good question. How long it takes to realize this Ishavasyan principle. It's there for us. It's stated very clearly, but how long we can actually shape our consciousness and our activities accordingly. It's just like we know from the first or second, class we attend anywhere that we are not this body, we're a spirit soul. But how long it takes to realize it is a different matter. So, Gyan and Vigyan. So, the time duration is based on our own desires. As intensely and sincerely, enthusiastically we practice devotional service, and specifically our chanting, that quickly we will realize this. So the realization is based on the purification of the heart and the purification of our consciousness. And the means to purify is through the practice of devotional service. So to the extent we are practicing with a sincere and earnest enthusiasm to realize this knowledge, praying to Krishna while we're chanting, Krishna, help me realize this Ishavasya principle. I hear it, but I don't believe it. I don't see it. Help me. Is that how we are praying and chanting? Or are we chanting just to finish our rounds? Right? So, with a prayerful mood and in a purposeful intent, one can very quickly come to this. Now, as you nicely said, we have been absence of this understanding for millions of lifetimes. So if it takes us a year or 2 or 10 years, don't be dissuaded. We've been millions of years of undoing we are trying to do. But bhakti is so powerful that it might take us a couple years. But remember, it could take you one day also. That's how powerful bhakti is. But if it takes a little bit of time, don't worry. But don't let it take beyond this lifetime. That was Srila Prabhupada's point. Finish your business now. He has given us the guarantee, the backdoor, passcode to the spiritual world. Let's take advantage of it.
Okay.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Howdy. Anything else? Okay. So we'll discuss 12 through 14 next week. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.